Hey everyone, it's November 22nd and I'm going to transition these orchids into semi-hydroponics. So you guys know that about 90% of my collection is an organic setup, but about 10% of my orchids are in semi-hydroponics. I've been exploring moving some of my orchids over into this setup, and what I'd like to do is document how these do. So I'm going to transition all of these over, and over time I'm going to share updates on how everything's doing. So what I've done so far is I've soaked all of these orchids. These are the Phalaenopsis Sogo Vivian Leaf's Edge. This is the Phalaenopsis equestris cerulea. This one over here is the Vonera Key Lime Stars. And this other orchid over here is the Brassavola besso. Now, I was soaking these in a mixture of kelp, a little bit of fertilizer, in warm water, and I was soaking them for 2 hours. And when I put this orchid in, a scorpion-looking creature came out. So I'm hoping there's no more. I've got my hydrogen peroxide handy. I hope there are no bugs. I did soak them together, so I'm going to make sure they're very clean. So with that said, again, it's November 22nd. I'm going to unpot all of these, get them bare root, clean the roots, and start transitioning them over. And I'm going to document how it looks over time. All right, so I've unpotted everything. All of the Phalaenopsis look really good. We'll start with the Phal equestris cerulea. The root system looks phenomenal. It was in tightly packed sphagnum moss, but otherwise it looks good. It's got a lot of new root tips. I'm going to see how I finagle this to go down without breaking the roots. But this looks good. I don't know that I have to cut anything on this. So far it looks really good. It's got a couple of roots that you could tell are going to grow in. So that's good news for the transition. So that is the Phalaenopsis equestris cerulea. This one here is the Phalaenopsis Sogo Vivian Leaf's Edge. This is the one with the variegated leaves. This one here, the roots look phenomenal. I think the only thing I'd cut off is this little bottom part that broke a little bit. Otherwise, plenty of brand new root tips. There are some roots that are going down into the medium. I did break one off when I was potting. I took off a root tip by mistake, but it looks like we've got another root tip over here. And I think these look really good, so we'll see how it does. Next up is the Brassavola besso. So this is the orchid that I found sort of a scorpion in it, and I was soaking it in a nutrient solution with everything else. So I'm going to make sure to put a lot of hydrogen peroxide on all of this just in case there's any eggs or anything around. The good news here is that we've got a new growth, so this will adapt nicely. We've got some new root tips I'll need to be very careful with. The roots overall look fine. I have to cut a few off, but otherwise this orchid's in good shape. And then the last one was a little sad. So this is the Vonera Key Lime Stars. This root system is really small. This is a very tiny orchid. It's a seedling. It is 2 to 3 years from blooming. I have to cut some of this off. I don't know how this is going to fare, but we're going to try. What I'm going to start doing is I am going to disinfect all of these, spray them down with hydrogen peroxide. Then I'm going to pot them up in Leca, and I will show you the finished result. Okay, so I've put everything into self-watering semi-hydroponics with Leca and a top layer of pebbles. And I got the idea of the pebbles from Annabelle over at the YouTube channel, The Orchid Room. I agree with her, I find that the top layer of Leca is very drying. It's very harsh for new root tips. So I put this layer on so that it can maintain the moisture and prevent that very dry top layer. So I'm going to put a video up of how I pot these and what I do. But for the sake of time, I just wanted to show you. I've potted everything up here. I made sure that the spheres were packed quite tightly, and then we will see what the root situation looks like as this progresses. Now this is in a frosted pot, but over time we'll be able to see new roots coming in. So this is the Phals Sogo Vivian's Leaf's Edge. So this is all done. And this was a nice healthy root system. So hopefully no die off. We have a new root tip growing in, so everything should be smooth. So this one is the Phal Equestris Cerulean. I actually ran out of small grade pebbles and I had to use larger grade pebbles for everything else, but sort of same situation here. All of the roots were very healthy, but I have no doubt that this is going to continue growing in nicely into the Leca. Next up, we've got the Brassavola Besso. And this one had a decent root system. I think maybe I trimmed off just a little bit, but so far we'll see if anything grows into the Leca. We'll be able to see it on the frosted pot. Here's a root right here. I'll keep an eye out to see what's going on with this. Good news with this one is that it has a nice new growth, which you could see growing right here. So hopefully this will continue to put roots down and adapt nicely into this medium. And then last up, we've got the Vonera Key Lime Stars. So this one, you're not going to see any roots on this side just because this orchid had a very limited root system. So don't see anything yet. I did pot it up a little bit lower just because there's nothing really to stabilize it, but I have a pebble. There's air in between. So there are just like a air pebbles just covering that base there. So it should be okay. So this is the only one that I'm potentially worried about just because it is not a very well-established orchid. The root system wasn't great. It's small, but we'll see how this goes. I'll say that I do have the Brassavola Digbyana, and it's comparably small, maybe a slightly bigger, and it's growing a new growth and adapting well. So hopefully we shall see more growth. So that is it. So I will keep you guys updated with monthly updates on how these are doing, and I will show you if they're adapting or if they're not. Hey guys, it's December 27th, so it's time for a 1 month update. So the last time I was here, I had just repotted these orchids. Let me take you in closer to see where we're at with the 1 month transition. All right, so let's start with the Sogo Vivian's Leaf's Edge. I'm excited about this one because right after I repotted it, you guys know it had a broken spike when I got it, but it branched out a new spike, and it looks like probably in the next month I'll have some blooms. In terms of the root system, it looks like there are new roots going down into the medium. A new leaf is growing. I have this orchid on a heat mat, so it's doing really well. In terms of the actual roots, let's see what we find here. It is very, very humid in there just because this water is warm. I'm not seeing anything visibly hit the outside of this frosted pot, but that doesn't mean that there isn't activity going on inside. Let me take off some of these pebbles. Carefully taking off some of the pebbles, I'm seeing that some of these roots are going down. I'm seeing some salt buildup. All the way on the left, there's a root there that looks like it's desiccated a bit. So this doesn't look so great, but so far it looks fine. I'm happy that it has new roots coming out. Pebble top layer is doing a good job of keeping this orchid nice and moist. I don't see a dry top layer, and the heat mat is making everything go up. So I think this will fare just fine, and I'm really excited about this spike. Next up, we've got the Brassavola Besso. Biggest thing is that the new growth, it was about here, and now it's reached this size, and hopefully it'll exceed this larger growth. So good growth overall. Let's take a look at the root system. So similar to the Phalaenopsis, this is very cloudy in here because of the heat mat. It's bringing all of the liquid up. I'm not seeing roots around the frosted pot, otherwise I'd call it out and zoom in. But let's take a look at the top layer of pebble. Upon removing that top layer, I see some new growths pushing in. If you see behind this root over here, there's a root underneath that is branching out, which is fantastic. It's branching from an old growth. We have some roots that died off over here. I honestly don't want to dig too much because this is still establishing in here, but this is a great sign. Nothing circling around the pot yet, but we'll see how it continues to do. Next up is the Vonera Key Lime Stars. Not so much growth. This one did not have an extensive root system. Taking a look at the orchid, it looks like we have a new growth actually. If you can see it, I'll take off the pebbles and show you shortly, get better light, but basically right here, there is a new growth, which is good. In terms of the actual roots, I'm not seeing anything circling the pot, or I would focus in on it. Again, these are cloudy because of the heat mat, and it wicks the water up, but let's take a look under the pebbles. All right, so this is better than I anticipated. There's some roots that are growing through the leca, so that's great. It looks like this root over here will circle the pot. We'll be able to see something. And it looks like we have two growths. There's one over here and there's one behind it. So that's phenomenal. So I'm glad this is actually doing something. This one had a terrible root system, so I'm happy to see these new roots coming down. Next up is the Phalaenopsis equestris cerulean. In this 1 month, we've got a new leaf that has been continuing to grow. This one has some slow-release fertilizer, so it has a boost. I find that there's some roots coming out. It looks like Phalaenopsis are so far liking this setup. In terms of the roots, let's see what I find here. It looks like we do have some new roots that have circled the container. This is a brand new root. This is an old root, I believe. Looks like we have another root over here. This one is definitely liking the setup. So far, I'm very hopeful that Phalaenopsis like this. Here's the water reservoir. I'll say that I have to water this by the end of the week. This is empty, so it's sucking up its water reservoir. Let's take a look a little closer. So I don't want to dig too deep into the pot, but you could sort of see that there's new roots that have been going into the medium over here. I do have slow release fertilizer pellets in here. I think this orchid is really liking this setup. Yeah, so far so good. I am quite pleased with this. There is a new root back there as well. So yeah. 1 month in, so far so good. These orchids look pretty happy. I'm most excited about this orchid. It did not have an extensive root system and it's throwing roots down. This one has a new growth and the Phalaenopsis are doing well. This one has a spike, which maybe next time I do this update, it'll be blooming. And this one is really happy. So far, thumbs up. Hello everybody, it is January 30th. And time for another update. So these orchids have been here for 2 months and I'm going to show you the root system. So Phals Vivian looks good. She's opening up all of her blooms, so she's looking great. Her root system is looking pretty good. There's roots coming down into the medium. If we take a look at the Leca here, we'll see that there is, let's see, I'm not seeing a ton. We do see some root tips coming in here. So those are looking good. But so far, this one seems pretty happy. And then I've also noticed with Vivian that she is also branching another flower spike from this node over here. So this originally was broken, branched out, and now we're gonna see another flower spike. So I'm curious how far that goes in another month. Alrighty, next up, Vonera Key Lime Stars. It's got a new growth. So far it's going well. We've got some root tips that we see coming up through the top. And then if we take a look at the medium, we've got some algae on the wick. We see a root right over here. Let me brighten that up for you guys. And then let's see, not a ton of root action, but I think it's doing just fine. I'm not seeing anything through the pot just yet. Oops, I just dropped some pebbles. But I think it's a good sign that we're starting to see some roots come up. So there's some stuff going on in there, and this growth is looking like it's going down pretty healthy. So I think, yeah, so there are roots that are going right into the leca. I don't think this is going to have a problem. Up next is Brassavola beso. There's a root popping up, and then we've got a new growth coming in, and it is going to exceed the other growth, which is great. This one is growing nice and strong. In terms of the roots, it looks like it's putting down some new roots, which is great, and those are coming from the new growth. In terms of what we're seeing here through the pot, not seeing a ton yet, but I think a lot of these roots are heading down towards the middle, so I'm curious to see if next month we'll see more. But so far, I think this one is also liking the setup, just because we're starting to see some of these roots go down, and that growth is getting taller. Up next is Phaloquestra cerulean. One thing I notice is, I don't know if this is rot over here, but I'm noticing this black part on here. So I don't know, I'm keeping an eye on this, not sure what it is. Otherwise, the top leaf is getting larger, which is fantastic. There's roots that are going down in the center. So right in here, there's a couple of roots, which is great. So those are going to be going down into the medium, and this one has been growing down into the medium. If we take a look, it is going down. We do have roots that have been going into the leca. Not noticing die-off really. Some of these were here already. This one is doing just fine. So I'm also curious to see if we get more roots next month. But that is the update for January 30th, 2021. One more month, and then you guys will see the full adaptation. Hey guys, it's March 7th. Today's the final update in this series. These orchids have been in semi-hydro for a little over 3 months. And let me take you a little bit closer. So this is Phals Vivian. So far, all of her buds have opened up. There was one deformed bud that opened in the beginning, but everything else looks perfect. In terms of the root adaptation, so far, everything has gone really well. There's a new root coming up near the spike over here, and the roots that have gone down have survived the transition. So let me take you a little bit closer. So you can see there's a root over here, another one. This one is actually the wick. That's a little bit of algae. These roots have gone down. These are new just because they're so much closer to the surface. Normally when I repot, they go inside. And then we've got a root that is going down into the water reservoir. This is very firm, and it's surviving, living in the water. So ultimately, this orchid's doing really well. I'd say that this was a very successful transition. Moving on to Phaloquestra cerulean. This one is doing well. I'd say that this one looks like it's about to lose its bottom leaves. The color on the bottom leaves has lightened up, which is not surprising. These Phalaenopsis orchids do tend to lose their bottom leaves. But in terms of the root adaptation, the roots are going down. The issue that I saw earlier, I thought it could have been some sort of rot. It is actually algae. So this is, I touched it, I pulled some of it out. It was actually green algae. So it's nothing I need to worry about. It is not rot. The roots are going down pretty nicely on this one. Taking a little bit closer, let's see what the roots look like. There's a root over here. Looks like it's surviving just fine. Looks like the older root system is still here. I don't know if it's going to survive the transition, but it doesn't look like it's rotting from what I'm seeing here. Here's another root tip. And yeah, I think overall this is fine. It's thrown roots down, but they've sort of circled the top of the pot. But they are going down, and I don't think they're dying. So overall, I think this one's just fine. It's going to lose its bottom leaves, like this one for sure, and it might lose that one. I think the Sogo Vivian is doing a little bit better than this one, but I think this one will be okay. It needs just some more time to get these new roots to go down. And I think the other roots may die off. I'm not too sure. It's sort of hard to tell with these frosted pots, but we'll see. I'll keep you guys posted. Moving on, this one is the Brassavola Bezo. Yep, this one is doing pretty well. Let me go back a little bit. So this was the newest growth. I was hoping that this new growth would at least match the size of this growth over here, and it didn't. However, it is also pushing out a new growth overall. So there is a new growth coming. It's very small at the bottom, so as you can see here at the base. So hopefully that growth will match this one. I think it's not surprising that the growth did not match the size of this one. It probably would have if I potted this in a similar setup that it was before, bark. But I think overall it's fine. I did drastically change the environment of this orchid, so I mean, it's always something to consider. Taking a look at the roots, it looks like we've got a root tip right over here. This is the wick. And then we've got roots going down. This is a firm root over here. Yeah, another root right there. Yep. Looks like these are okay. The pot actually feels very firm. There's not much give, so I think there's a lot of roots happening in the middle. That always happens. All right, let's see if I could hold this and turn it around. Yeah, no, I think this is okay. I think there's another root. I think the roots are growing in the core of the pot. Like, I feel there's not much give when I squeeze the pot, and I think it's filling up. So this one I think is also a success. I just hope that that new growth exceeds the size of this last growth, and then I'd consider this successful. I mean, overall it's adapting, but it's no surprise that it didn't reach this size. All right, up last, we've got the Vonera Key Lime Stars. So this was the growth that we had last time. It's maturing very nicely. It's actually exceeding the size of the other growth. I think it'll get past this other growth over here, which is fantastic. In terms of how the roots are doing, if I recall correctly, it's a similar situation where I think the roots are going down into the middle of the pot. There are some roots that are going on top. Here's a root over here. So there's roots going down, but I think they're going down at the core of the pot. So let me show you what's going on. Yeah, so they are going down. This one's stuck to the rock, so I'm not gonna force it. That's also stuck. But yeah, I think we can yeah, definitely. We can verify that these roots are going down into the leca. They're going into the grooves. Oh, this one has a, oh, I can move this. Yeah. It looks like this is just fine. I think this is exactly what we want. The roots are going right in between the spaces in the leca, which is exactly what we're looking for. And those spaces are airy, and it's right in the middle. So this one is going to be just fine. Overall, I'd say that this 3-month adaptation was a success. I tried to get different types of orchids. Ultimately, we've got Phalaenopsis, which I think adapt very easily to semi-hydro, and Brassavola hybrid orchids, which also seem to be doing really well. So normally it is said that Brassavolas like to dry out, but I'm finding that they're growing roots down and they're not actually dying off, especially the new roots, which is great. Anyhow, I know this was a long video, but I wanted you guys to follow along on how these orchids do. They have new growths, they've got new flowers in the case of this one, and I think they're gonna continue to adapt really well. So in terms of how I'm moving my collection over, I am slowly transitioning my collection over into self-watering leca. Not for my catasetums, just because I prefer sphagnum moss for my catasetums. But for the ones that I think I can get away with it, I'm going to move them over. Anyhow, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And subscribe to my channel for more regular orchid updates. Talk soon, guys. Bye.